Ah, smart water. Pure, crisp taste.
That's really good water.
It's the kind of water that says, I have my life together.
I do feel more sophisticated.
Smart water. For those with a taste for taste. Grab yours today.
Leading a business today means constantly adapting. On the Executive Insights podcast brought to you by AWS, global leaders share how they're making tough calls, testing bold ideas, and putting innovation into practice, generative AI included. If you're looking for real stories behind what's working, this is it. Subscribe to the Executive Insights podcast today. Available now on all major podcast platforms.
Welcome to The Eagle, a Times Union podcast. I'm Jessica Marshall. The Times Union broke the news last week that after 12 years, there'd been a major development in one of the biggest unsolved cases in the region. 52-year-old Edward Leon was arrested on July 31st. He was charged in the 2013 arson in Schenectady that killed David Terry and 3 of his children. Before we continue, though, I'm going to warn you, what we are about to go into in the first half of this episode may be disturbing to some listeners, so please listen with care.
So on May 2nd, 2013, there was a horrific fire on Hulett Street in Schenectady.
Times Union managing editor Brendan Lyons covered the investigation starting the following year, 2014.
It seemed to be apparent that it had been deliberately set by someone who had poured gasoline outside a front door of the residence, lit it on fire, and disappeared into the night.
The fire started just after 4 a.m. 32-year-old David Terry, 3-year-old Leah, 2-year-old Michael, and 11-month-old Donovan all died. 5-year-old Sapphire survived, but she was critically injured. Schenectady police called in the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives to investigate.
There was a lot of relationships tied to this David Terry and these children with, different parents and different boyfriends and girlfriends and things.
David Terry was a stay-at-home dad. He had recently kicked out a 27-year-old man named Robert Butler, who'd been staying in the second-floor apartment Terry shared with his kids. Terry and Butler had an argument, and police quickly zeroed in on him as a suspect.
Mr. Butler had threatened him, that he was going to get him, and they went back and forth with a lot of text messages and Facebook messages and those sorts of things. You've got these text messages from Mr. Butler, who became a suspect when a Schenectady detective who interviewed him the day after the fire claimed that he smelled like gasoline. One of the problems with that assertion was that when they tested his clothing, there was no gasoline on his clothing that was found. There was, I think, some very minor petroleum on shoes that probably any person's shoes might have from, pumping gas at a gas station.
Butler had an alibi. He said he was in Saratoga Springs at the time, partying with Schenectady, the mother of the children living with Terry, and with another guy named Brian Fish. In statements to police after hours of interrogation, both Schenectady and Brian Fish said Butler had driven to Schenectady that night around the time of the fire.
Police zeroed in on Robert Butler and his crew, and they became sort of the target of the investigation, and ultimately Butler, based on statements that their attorneys had said were coerced, 2 people had given statements implicating Butler, although there was evidence that he was in Saratoga Springs when the blaze broke out, and they could not find the car that allegedly had brought him to Schenectady.
Police arrested Butler the day after the fire. He was charged with arson and with murder, federal charges that could carry the death penalty. Schenectady later recanted her statement implicating Butler.
And so there was also this other individual
David Terry had been in a relationship at the time with a woman named Brianna Frolke. She lived in St. Johnsville, a small community about 45 miles west of Schenectady.
She was planning, it sounded like, to possibly marry Mr. Terry, and she had a boyfriend named Edward Leon, who she had been with for about 4 years. And although they had broken up, Edward Leon still slept at her residence and slept next to her in the same bed, in fact. And he was a delivery driver for a company called Quantz that's in Amsterdam.
Police questioned Edward Leon, who was 41 years old at the time. Was he in Schenectady around the time of that fire on Hulett Street? He said no, that he had nothing to do with it. David Terry had been receiving text messages in the months before he died from an anonymous number, someone who called themselves the Undertaker. The messages were threatening. One of them allegedly warned David Terry that he would never make it to his wedding, which was planned for later that year. Several days before the fire, the Undertaker pressured David Terry for his address. David Terry sent it to him. In November of 2013, 6 months after the fire, Edward Leon testified before a grand jury. He told them that on the morning of the fire, he'd left his home in St. Johnsville, stopped at a Cumberland Farms, and then went on to his job in Amsterdam. He said he was never in Schenectady. He also said that he never sent any text messages to David Terry.
At some point, the federal public defender is representing Robert Butler, and the federal public defender has an investigator who is a retired Albany detective named Tom Kubish. And Tom Kubish is, as other law enforcement officials have put it to me, is one hell of a detective. He had started to focus on Edward Leon. He had learned where that phone that was sending the text messages had been purchased. It was at like a Walgreens near Poughkeepsie, 2 hours south or so of Albany. And he drove down there and had asked them about who had purchased the phone. Edward Leon, he confirmed, had purchased that phone. And he learned that because Edward Leon, in order to get a discount, had stupidly used his own name, I think, or his own credit card or something to purchase that phone. And so he tied that to him. In addition, Kubish started looking at the massive amounts of footage taken from street cameras that were owned by the city of Schenectady, and they're placed on poles throughout the city. He could see on that footage a van, a gray van that had a distinctive trait to it, and that was that the rear hatch doors on that van had been replaced with dark colors. Some had said blue, some said purple. And so it kind of stood out. And he could see that that van had driven toward the Hulett Street address minutes before the blaze started. At the same time, you could see that it was like a 2-minute drive from where that van is seen going toward the residence to where it's last seen leaving and driving away from the residence.
Kubish tracked down a van in a junkyard in northern New York. It was Leon's van, and it also matched the van on the security footage.
His initial story to police and the grand jury was that he never went to Schenectady. When his world started to collapse a little, it was, okay, I did go to Schenectady, but I just drove by the residence. I was trying to see where the guy lived because he, in case he wanted to fight him or something along those lines. Okay. Then the story eventually became that, okay, I did see a fire. It had just started. It was on the left side of the door, which is where the fire was started. And he claimed that a man in a hoodie had been walking by on Hulett Street, and he got out of there and never told anyone for more than 6 months because, as he put it to them, everyone would think I did this.
2 months after Leon testified, in January of 2014, he admitted to investigators that he lied to the grand jury. He was on Hulett Street that night, and he did send those text messages, calling himself the Undertaker.
And in March 2014, I drove out to St. Johnsville with a photographer from the Times-Union, and we sat in Brianna Froelke's kitchen and interviewed her and Edward Leon. And of course, he denied involvement in the fire, but by that point, because he had already corrected his statements to the grand jury when he testified months earlier a second time, he kind of admitted to most of it. He admitted to everything but setting the fire. He admitted to having a grudge with David Terry, that he was not happy that he was going to marry his ex-girlfriend, because at that point, the gig was up.
The charges against Robert Butler were dropped in February of 2014. He'd spent 9 months in prison. In November 2015, more than a year and a half after that admission, Edward Leon was convicted. Not of setting the Hulett Street fire, though. He was convicted of lying to a federal grand jury about his whereabouts on that night. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He served 8 of them. Meanwhile, Jenica Duell and Brian Fish, the two who implicated Robert Butler originally, were convicted of perjury and sentenced to prison as well. The case got brief national attention in December of 2015. Sapphire Terry, the lone survivor of the fire, suffered severe burns and major health issues. Her aunt, who's her official guardian, posted a message on Facebook asking for people to grant Sapphire's Christmas wish. She wanted to receive some cards to decorate a little card tree that she'd been given. The post went viral, and the response was massive. She received hundreds of thousands of holiday cards. She even got one from President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama. Since then, Sapphire has led several donation drives to support child burn victims and their families. She's 17 now.
And Edward Leon gets out of prison in 2022, and he's on probation for a few years and never had any hiccups that I could find with his probation. He looked like he got back into working and went on with his life. Federal prosecutors had always privately defended their decision not to prosecute him, suggesting that maybe it was just a coincidence that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and really trying to still indirectly defend their decision to go after Robert Butler and paint him as the real suspect, which was just amazing to me given the amount of evidence. But the question was, he was never charged.
But on July 31st of 2025, that changed.
The chief judge in New York's Northern District calls an attorney in Albany, I believe, Kevin Louisbrand, alerting him that they had a capital case and that they needed him to represent a person who was charged in a capital case. There were potential death penalty charges. I learned that Edward Leon had been arrested and indicted and was going to be in federal court. And I went to the proceeding, and the Times-Union was the only news organization in the courtroom when U.S. Marshals brought him in.
Wow.
One of his sons and his daughter-in-law sat in the front row. A few just courthouse observers were in the courtroom, and he was arraigned on the charges that he had committed this heinous crime 11 years ago.
What are you thinking, right? Like you did the interview with him 11 years ago, and here you are sitting in a courtroom, like watching him finally be indicted for this crime. Like, I don't know what's going through your head.
I guess what went through my head, like many people, was setting aside whether he's guilty or not guilty.
Right.
What took you so long? There was so much evidence, and he had lied about his whereabouts. He had a motive. He made threats. He was there at the crime scene. He admitted to a federal grand jury after first lying to them. He then admitted that he was at the scene of the crime. I think that prosecutors maybe had been reluctant to pursue him, in part because they had arrested someone else, charged someone else, and that's an ultimate defense, right? Well, you don't know what you're doing. You charged another person with this homicide. But I will say that people that are close to the case said that they think that something happened probably within the last year in which there will be some sort of new evidence.
The following week, federal prosecutors revealed some of that new evidence. Leon had allegedly confessed that he set the fire to an ex-girlfriend in a February 2024 phone call. At the time, someone had shot a rifle round through that ex-girlfriend's front door. It wasn't long after she'd broken up with Leon to get back together with her ex-husband. Also, the ex-husband's tire had been slashed and his brake lines were cut. According to court papers, the woman accused Leon in this phone call of shooting at her and damaging the car. She accused him of setting the fire at Hulett Street as well, to which he replied, quote, "Yes, I did that, and that was a total up on my part." Prosecutors also say Leon confessed to setting the fire to a fellow inmate while in prison. There's no, definitive sense that they're going to go for the death penalty if convicted, right? It's just a possibility at this point.
It's a possibility, and they admit, the prosecutor in federal court at Mr. Leon's arraignment had told the judge that they had not made a decision yet on that, but that they wanted to talk with his defense attorney, Mr. Louis Brand, to discuss that matter as well. I didn't know if that meant a plea offer of some sort too, which I don't know that it hasn't happened in this case probably, but in some of these cases, you get to a point where the government might say, hey, we won't go for the death penalty if your guy pleads to this and agrees to a life sentence or something. So there could be something like that.
Edward Leon appeared in federal court in Albany on Wednesday for a detention hearing. Sapphire Terry and her mother, Jenica Duell, were both there. Family spokesman Ryan Laurie talked to the media afterward.
It's a lot to process. It's been a lot to process today. It's been a lot of information. There were a lot of people in that courtroom, and it's going to take us a while to process that information. So.
For more of our reporting on the case against Edward Leon, head over to timesunion.com. We're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, we're going to talk with longtime Capitol Repertory Theater artistic director Maggie Mancinelli-Cahill. "12-year-old Jaliek Rainwalker vanished without a trace from a small upstate New York village on a cool November night in 2007. His adoptive parents say he ran away. Police believe he was murdered, but a body has never been found, and a suspect has never been named."
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, okay, all right, but you don't want to talk.
Then when I learned they were trying to undo the adoption, that's when I learned that this story was very complicated, a lot more complicated than I even thought.
Almost 2 decades later, the case remains unsolved. I'm Jessica Marshall.
And I'm Wendy Repertory.
In this podcast from the Times-Union, we take a deep dive into the mystery of this missing child and try to find some answers.
So have you come to terms that Jaliek is probably dead?
Yes. Okay. I feel that he was killed on November 1st, 2007.
Available now, wherever you listen to podcasts.
If you're enjoying this podcast, take advantage of all the Times-Union has to offer and support our efforts to bring you award-winning journalism by becoming a Times-Union subscriber today. Go to timesunion.com/subscribe.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Eagle, a Times Union podcast. I'm Jessica Marshall. The longtime guiding force of the Capitol Repertory Theater in Albany is retiring. Maggie Mancinelli-Cahill has been the artistic director there since 1995. She's going to hand over the reins to a successor this month. The Times Union's Steve Barnes sat down with Mancinelli-Cahill this week to reflect on her illustrious career and what comes next.
Hi, I'm Steve Barnes at the Times Union, and I am here with Maggie Mancinelli-Cahill. She is the longtime producing artistic director of Capitol Repertory Theater, and she's officially stepping down at the end of this year. The transition is underway to Miriam Weisfeld, who will be continuing actually in a dual role with the Adirondack Theater Festival and Capitol Repertory Theater. So, Maggie, you are almost at the end of the run of your final production as both the producing artistic director and the stage director for a production. Once runs through this coming weekend at the Rep. And how do you feel about this production and going out on this note?
I love the show. I love the production. This has been an amazing group of people to work with. And so I really couldn't wish for anything better than that. And it's the perfect ending for me because it has such a bittersweet flavor to it that is really has these undercurrents of love in it. And if I had to describe really how I feel, it would be that I have so much love in my heart for the people I work with and have worked with and the community. And it's hard to say goodbye, but I feel that I must with love in my heart.
Let's play a quick fire game. 30 years, scores and scores of productions you directed. Favorite one? You have to pick one that you directed.
Did I know you were going to ask me that?
You did not.
Because I feel stupid right now because I can name you several that
Okay,
are...
give me three that are really dear to your heart.
All right. Ironically, I think Outside Mullingar, because I always wanted to block that John Wayne kiss from The Quiet Man. I just had a great time doing that. Terra Nova, the story about the Englishmen who discover the South Pole and die before they do. I love doing that play. And it was Maggie surrounded by, oh gosh, five beautiful men. Why would I love that show? It was everything that I really love, you know, history and great performances and characters and scope and 100% abstract set. I loved that. That made my heart go, oh. I also love doing Christmas at Pemberley, Miss Bennett, Christmas at Pemberley, because I love classics. And then probably Midsummer Night's Dream. Working with the actors who were in
you
it.
freed them. You really freed them to be exuberant and silly and play. I mean, this was theater as play.
It was a blast. We all knew that we were going to take chances, and the cast really did, and they were absolutely marvelous.
Let's look forward. It is mid-January. You are free from having to go to the office. You don't have to worry about budgets. Miriam has the second half of her season that's underway. Your contemporary, Julie Boyd at Barrington Stage, after she stepped down, she traveled basically the whole year. I mean, she went to Japan, she went to France, they went to Italy, she went to the Caribbean. Is Maggie going somewhere?
That's so funny. Yeah, I will be traveling. There's a couple of people in the United States that have asked me to visit them, and I've never been able to say yes. And so I said yes. And so in January, I am planning a trip to Florida. Now, that is not exotic, and people here do it every other day, you know. But for me to be able to say yes to traveling to Florida in January, it's a first. And I'm telling you, and my friend, when she asked me and I said, yes, I'll do it, she was shocked because she's asked me so many times and I've always said, no, it's, you know, I need to be here for the theater. And, you know, I mean, people know my theater job keeps me, you know, pretty busy. So I am looking forward to traveling there. And of course, I am looking forward to being able to travel to California where, you know, my son lives. And I I do like that. And people ask me, am I moving to California? And I go, no, I don't want to move to California.
Do you think about legacy at all?
Absolutely.
Or do you leave that?
I do. Okay. Because I think about what I wish I could have gotten done. I've never done anything really so that, oh, this will be good. I'll be remembered for this. No, not that kind of thing.
Wait a minute. 30 years ago, you jumped into a, on paper, $1 million financial hole. You kept the wolves away from the door for decades. When we first met, you thought I was one of them. You told me, if you're here to get my theater shut down, I'm going to kick you out.
I did.
Our very first interview,
you
told me that.
Very sweet of me.
It must have been hard thinking about the transition to coming under Proctor's umbrella, but that first year saved you $300-some thousand. The company could very well have died multiple times.
Yeah. Okay. So,
but for your tenacity and some strong board members.
I'm glad you asked about that, because I've been asked, what was the hardest moment, blah, blah, blah. And I will tell you that I remember when I came to Albany, the theater was in much worse shape than actually I even had known when I was hired. And I knew that it had debt when I was hired, but it turned out to really be a much deeper hole. So we had to raise a certain amount of money fast, and then we had to call an amazing number of creditors and ask them to forgive our debt, to please, forgive our bill, and we would give them, space in the playbill, tickets, these kind of things. We started bartering with people. Now, after we did that the first time, and it was very painful because I'd never been through something like that before, but I just knew we had to do it. And then we ended up having to not do that once, not do it twice, but probably on 5 different occasions. You cannot sustain a big organization and Capital Rep is big for Albany. At that time we were about $2.1 million, I think was our budget then. You can't sustain an organization like that has so much debt. You don't just get that done one time. And a systemic debt problem in a LORT theater it's a tough problem, because it means you're going to get out of it with philanthropy. And that's a hard road to hoe. I will tell you, one of the things I'm happiest about right now is that every time I drive by the theater, on the corner of Livingston and Broadway, they just dug the hole for the foundation of our own actor housing. They're digging it, Steve. You can go and you can see it. And I'm like,
I drove past it. That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's what that is.
So,
and
actor housing. Yeah. That's great.
I just think of the theater of Capital Rep as, and I've said this to people, as the little engine that could. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. I mean, if we didn't have that attitude, we would have closed on a number of occasions.
Thinking about the future, Miriam has said that you have a standing invitation to return as a guest director.
Yes, she's been very sweet about that.
Do you want to put a year in before that starts, or do you already have your eye on a play?
No, I want to take time. I haven't really thought about that. Steve, I've worked for about, I was trying to figure out the real time there. I think 55 years. I've never been on unemployment. I've never not worked. And so for me, just taking time to go, where do I want to put my energy for that, that last phase of where do I want to put the period on it? And I want to do some thinking about that, I wish I could be in a position where I could make a difference to a lot of arts. I think I'd be a very good arts advocate. And I would like to be able to talk with people in a way that reminds them that the arts are really important. There's not very much of that going around right now because of the atmosphere that we live in. But we'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
For more of Steve Barnes' theater reviews and restaurant news, visit timesunion.com/tablehopping or subscribe to his free weekly email newsletter. That's it for this week. We will be back soon with more from inside the newsroom. The Eagle is a production of the Times-Union. It's produced and edited by myself, Jessica Marshall, with help from Erica Smith and the Times-Union digital team. Our music is Flyin' by Top Floor. Special thanks to Brendan Lyons, Jim Franco, and Steve Barnes for their contributions to this episode. Got questions about the Eagle or any of the podcasts that we produce at the Times-Union? Email us at podcast@timesunion.com.